Third attempt. Hello and welcome to week 13 of the Brit Iron Fantasy Show. I'm your host James, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friends Sam and Matt in person.
I know it's
this
just
time.
new. It's
Very
a new
new.
studio. I like it.
New studio.
A bit different. We got shirts.
Ooh, very nice jerseys
Not
there.
signed though.
That's
Well,
the issue.
do you know what? If you wanted a signed jersey, young Samuel,
Signed.
the place you could go is the UKTouchdown.com.
And how do I find that, James?
Searching UKTouchdown.com.
Or what's your search engine of choice?
Probably Google, if I'm honest.
Not
but
sponsored.
Not sponsored.
Unless they want it.
Other search engines are available. Bing, Yahoo. My mind goes blank, so move on. But UK Touchdown is a great source of signed NFL and college memorabilia in the UK. There's also some great written articles on there, so be sure to go over and check it out. That is the UKTouchdown.com. Right, boys. New setup, new room, new studio,
New house.
New house.
new house. We do all live together as well. This is COVID.
Yeah,
COVID
yeah,
safe.
COVID friendly.
We have
One household.
officially cleared the two-week NFL clearance policy. It's been checked off by Goodell himself. We're good to go.
We've got him in the cupboard here. He said yes, it's okay.
And then
We'll let him out at
then we
8.
pushed him back in and started recording.
And there we go. So I guess we should first of all say as to why there hasn't been episodes the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Although it's
Pretty obvious.
Trio's been a bit busy moving in.
Yeah.
Matt's been a little bit lazy and drunk. But yeah,
Yeah, that
we're getting
happens.
to it now.
That happens. So we're back in week 13. Don't worry about the last few weeks; they didn't happen. But week 13, and we'll start off with my guy as we normally do.
Let's do it.
So Matt,
So
lead us away.
we're keeping it pretty much the same as if you watched the last episode. Current scores to catch everyone up. Me and Sam tied for first on 1 point. James currently sitting -2. But it's still all to play for. Here in week 13 coming up, we've got 4 weeks to go. Final week of my guy is going to be week 16. So anything could still happen, boys. The way the scoring works, just so everyone knows, come first, you get 1 point. Come second out of the 3 of us, you get none. Come third, you lose a point. Same as always. Sam, who are you bringing this week? Who is your my guy?
So we've had a couple of weeks off, and for most of the season, I was leading, and I feel like I need to jump back out. So I think I might
So
take.
leading because you picked Todd Gurley when he was in the running back 6.
And that actually lost me a point, if anything. So
Should have fact checked before I said that.
Yep.
Either way,
Running back
continue.
granted. But usually I make some pretty good picks. And the last time I went to this team, I won the week, and my bold claim about this that player came first on the week. I'm going to make another bold claim. I think this guy's going to be a top 3 running back on the week. He plays for the Cleveland Browns, and it is Nick Chubb. Now, he's not inside the top 12 on the season. Granted, it might be low-hanging fruit. But hear me out, boys. I think this is a game that Tennessee, they need to run the ball to win. That is their win condition. And Cleveland needs to run the ball to win. So this is 2 teams that clearly know they've both got the same win condition. They're both going to go out there. And I actually think Cleveland is going to do a better job stopping Tennessee now that you've got Myles Garrett coming back off the COVID list. So I think there's a really good shot that Chubb puts up a lot of points, just because both teams know they don't want to throw the ball. They know their win conditions. They'll both be happy to run the ball. And as long as the Browns can hold Henry, Chubb is, in my opinion, maybe the best running back in the league at the moment.
Ooh,
That's a big claim.
big claim. That's a bold claim.
I would like to agree with that because I've got my fancy, but it's a big claim.
Beating your guy and all, James.
Yeah, most definitely. But
I don't know. The only risk for that is Kareem Hunt. If he snags a few of those touchdowns.
Yeah, but I think Kareem Hunt is he's the receiving guy, right? And Chubb, since he's got back, has been very productive, and he's looked as good as he did before. And even though Kareem Hunt looked like a great running back one while Chubb was off, it's not like he came back and they just went, nah, right, it's a 50-50 split now. It's you've both got roles in the offense, you can both be productive, but Chubb is, I think, unquestionably the guy, the main running back, in a team that just completely centres around the run, and a team that I think is still really good and has got a lot of wins, and they're getting players back, and I think this team's going to the playoffs.
Oh, they will, 100%. Second in the AFC North, so they're pushing on. Doing well.
Shaking up your Ravens a little bit.
Let's not talk about this. It's a sad turn of events down in Baltimore, has to be said.
To move off of that for you, James.
Yeah, let's move
Who's
on.
your my guy? Let's get a bit more positive.
Right, so this may be seen as low-hanging fruit,
Brilliant. Both of
Depends
you,
how you wanna
low-hanging
see it.
fruit.
but he
Lovely.
is quarterback 20 on the year in half-point PPR, and he hasn't missed much time. Like Chubb, so not the same sort of low-hanging fruit. The reason I say he's low-hanging fruit is because he's playing against the Jets.
Right.
So
okay.
it's a bit of an obvious one. So my guy for this week is Derek Carr
Love
of
that.
the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think in our episode this week, Sam, I said leave the loving to me. And this is my opportunity to give him some loving. Because statistically, he's been having one of his best years. Before you look at the last 2 out of the last 3 games, I think it is.
I mean, that last game, what was that? 3 fumbles.
Yeah, I mean, granted, yes, that happened. But 2 out of how many games is it now? 13?
Granted,
Yeah,
and
12 games.
And I did say to you a couple of weeks ago that I will concede he's having a very good year.
Exactly.
You've said it again now, though, which means there's going to be 4 fumbles this week or something.
Why do you think?
Yeah, that's sort of jinxed me.
I'm here to win, man.
Sam's put his curse on it.
He did well against the Chiefs, so sometimes these things happen and guys have a bad day.
Yeah.
And he had it granted twice out of the past 3, as I just said, against the Falcons and the Broncos. But I mean, playing against the Jets, it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
So you can't go too wrong with that. And I think the Raiders need a win in this game because if you look at their schedule after, they've got the Colts, the Chargers, the Dolphins, and then the Broncos, which are all games that they could lose on a coin flip. So they need this win to push for playoffs. And I think this is the game that Derek Carr proves that this is his best year of his career and gets it done against the Jets because it's the Jets.
Yeah.
Who can't do it against the Jets, let's be honest.
Speak about a running baseline before this year, we've got the Jets.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a free bye.
It's like James's old school passing baseline against the Seahawks.
yeah.
It's like the Jets is just fantasy baseline
Literally.
because the Jets are terrible.
We'll keep it moving.
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
Let's not
Keep
rabbit
it
hole on
moving.
that one. But so you guys both gone a little bit low hanging fruit. You could say in different ways. Mine off the cuff doesn't sound too bad. The running back 43 on the year. You think, oh, bit of an out there pick. But it's not. It's Raheem Mostert who's been injured.
Oh,
So it's similar to Sam's. I may have shaken my head a little bit when he said his, but
There's a theme here.
similar lines here. So we're going head to head with running backs. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But the reasoning behind this, the Bills, they're not great against the run. 25th against the run this year in terms of yardage, allowing about 129 yards per game. 30th for rushing touchdowns. So massive opportunity there.
yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, he had a bad showing last week. First game back from injury, coming off the bye week as well against the Rams. But they're ranked 4th for rushing yards. So it's completely different ends of the spectrum.
Different D lines.
Great
Exactly.
defense,
Completely
Basically,
different
no,
defenses.
Aaron Donald.
Precisely. I mean, it's a run-first team. We know what we see from the Niners, especially at Jimmy G still. And most of, even though as much as it is a committee, he is the head of that committee.
Yeah.
There's no argument. When he's out there, he is the guy. He's got that big play potential. He can make it happen. And this is a whole team that's getting healthy. And I think playoffs in that division especially, it's not happening for them this year. But they want to show they're still a contender, and they want to say, we're still a factor in the NFC. We're going to take as many scalps as we can on the way out and come back next year like, right, we're still in that window. And I think it's going to be a whole team that just wants to get out there and win. So it means the defense steps up, puts them in a great position to just run the ball and most at profits.
Yeah, I mean, 49ers were our number 1 ranked team coming into this year.
Oh,
And I think the Russian part of that was a factor in that decision. So
Oh,
it's a
definitely.
great decision.
It's an amazing scheme that Shanahan does. Whatever it is that he does with his kind of running scheme, it works wonders in Atlanta. It's worked really well since he's got to San Francisco, and I think it really stands testament that we had them ranked number 1, right? We thought they were going to be great, but the fact that they've been so still relatively productive, they've been in a lot of their closer games. They've never looked properly. I think there was one game where Nick Mullins had a really bad outing and they just looked bad. But the rest of the time, they've looked okay. They've looked competitive, and they've done this with just a myriad of injuries and a couple games where half their squad was on the COVID list.
Yeah.
So, for a coaching standpoint, I think what Shanahan and his staff have done there is so impressive.
100%.
Oh, undoubtedly.
3 great picks, though, has to be said. But
Competitive week.
Yeah, very competitive. 3 almost low-hanging fruit, I have to say, which is great to see.
I just can't wait for my point.
It's business end of the season, as you can tell. We've all gone right. Nothing
Yeah,
clever.
yeah.
Where can I
At the
get
end of the
any
day-
advantage possible?
I've got some ground to make up as well. Mine is 2. I need to make up 3 points on the year.
You're still in with a chance there if it goes your
Yeah,
way.
it's an
Yeah.
easy swing, isn't it? Because if we lose a couple of weeks, you win a couple of weeks, suddenly.
Bob's your uncle.
Or your ex-boss.
Or your ex-boss. That's a bit of an inside joke. So we'll move on to the start sit. No, not the start sit. Yes, the start sit.
The start sit.
Yeah, the start sit part of this episode. It's been a long day at work. My eyes are failing me right now. Do need glasses. But this week, I'm just going to read off all the questions to you boys because I've got it right here in front of me, so it makes more sense that way. So we'll kick it off with a question from Instagram. It comes from PJ Mellon. 3. Don't forget the 3.
Get the
Through
three.
the other
Third, yeah. I would like to meet PJ Mellon Senior and Junior before we meet the 3rd, but okay. He says, I have Mahomes, who's playing against the Broncos this week. But what should I do with Lamar Jackson against the Cowboys, who I presume is on his bench? So basically, would you start Mahomes or Lamar Jackson this week, given that Lamar Jackson will play?
Right. I've got a big question about this. I'm making an assumption that this is a 1-year redraft, right style league. First of all, how the hell have you got Jackson and Mahomes on one team
Round
in a
1,
redraft?
round 2.
Yeah, legit. That's
how
early.
have you done that? Second of all, if you've done that, how have you not traded Jackson away? He's not been overly productive this year, like insane. And there is always going to be someone in most like home leagues. There will always be someone who's willing to overpay. I mean, even in our league, I'd say our dynasty league is quite a good competitive league. Like everyone in there stays up to date. They make trades that they think they tend to not overvalue players, and they do it relatively well. But even then, all of us will overvalue players. Yeah. So how the hell you've still got Jackson on your roster here baffles me. But I think it's an obvious pick. Patrick Mahomes on the year, I think might even be the quarterback 1. He's putting up yards left, right, and centre. Yeah. He's got an amazing offense. They've got a great matchup in the Broncos that are just all over the place. And on the flip side, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are kind of in freefall. Is he even going to play this week?
Oh, yeah, COVID dependent, of course.
I think we should know about what league. This has got to be dynasty, off the point you're saying, unless this guy's like drafted ridiculously. Like,
yeah, it could have started a few years ago.
I think this has got to be a dynasty.
Yeah.
I think it's that argument of, do you just keep, if the rest of your squad's good enough, do you keep both and then you're always secure? Well, you would have thought you were before this year. Lamar Jackson's had a few questionable ones, but I think, in terms of this question, it's obvious. You're playing Mahomes. Lamar Jackson, even if they'd had a full week, he just played against the Steelers, was coming into it, normal week, I'd still say Mahomes. With all the uncertainty on Lamar Jackson's side, it just makes it completely just non-factor for me because he's been the better quarterback all year.
Well, perhaps I should play devil's advocate here then. Because what about if Lamar Jackson has one of those bounce-back games? Because the Cowboys are one of the worst pass defenses in the league statistically. Yeah, would you still take Mahomes on that front?
We're 12 weeks, 13 weeks into the season, right? I think it's quite clear that Jackson's year last year, and I don't think anyone expected it to be, but that year was not what is going to trend to be the norm for him. That is going to be one of his outlier years. And that's not taken away from what he did. But, I mean, the Cowboys have been a bit on the up. They've, granted their last Thanksgiving game was a joke.
Yeah, atrocious.
But, you've got to take, especially if you're at the business end of the season, at quarterback, that is a position, in my opinion, you can really win or lose yourself a week, right? Especially with someone like Jackson, because Jackson doesn't have those stable passing baselines. So Jackson, if he could go out, they could win the game, and he passes for 150 yards, and they just run the ball, right? Yeah. And they go through that stable of running backs, and the Ravens could look great. Mahomes is, even with the great running backs they have, Mahomes is everything in that offense. Yeah. They pass for shed tons of yards, and they've got a great matchup. You've got to go with the hot hand.
Yeah, I mean, I say I was playing devil's advocate. I'm also taking Mahomes
for conversation.
Yeah,
that one. Yeah,
purely to give Lamar a bit of maybe a full argument for Lamar, but I'm also taking Mahomes. The consistency there is there, whereas from Lamar it's not. So yeah, I do agree with you boys as well on that one. But we have another question here from Instagram as well. Samuel_Peeps_1. So he's the first Samuel Peeps.
Underscore.
Congratulations,
as opposed to PJ Mellon, who's the third. So 1-0 Samuel. And he asks, what should I do with Zeke? Which is a question that's popped up a few times now on this podcast. Of course, Zeke Cowboys playing the Ravens this week. Of course, Ravens have a few COVID issues still lurking about. But of course, Zeke as well has a few Zeke issues lurking about.
Yeah, that's true.
So, who are we taking?
I think at this point, when it comes to Zeke, you've got to. I think you've seen it. Whatever happened on Thanksgiving, since Dalton has come in as he's playing, he's got over obviously it was COVID and the concussion and everything that went on with him. You've seen 2 games, one where Zeke started to look more like Zeke, and one where just the whole team looked off. But that wasn't a game where you specifically said Zeke was the problem. It was a terrible fantasy week, but it wasn't like he had a shocker while everything else worked around him. So I think Zeke's that player you've just got to start week in, week out. Like I've got him in Dynasty, and I've been through that with him this year. Of the start of the first 4 or 5 weeks, it was like, nice. It's just going well. And then that goes down, and it's just been downhill ever since. I mean, he had the fumbling problem from the start of the year, but he did enough to make up for it. Whereas now, when he fumbles, suddenly you've got him going from 11 points, that's how he's done in Sleeper for us, if he loses it as well, down to like 8. And I think any time someone like Zeke is getting less than 15, you're like, oh, bad week. Which you expect so much, which is why I think it's so harsh on him. But then, when he says what to do with him, is he saying just this week? Is he talking Dynasty?
Well,
I think either way, for me, it's the same, and I'm in that spot. I tried to shop him. The price isn't there at the moment because people don't know what you're seeing. That O-line is trending the wrong way long term.
It's a tricky one.
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? This very much comes down to what format. Like if you're in at this point in the season, if you're in a redraft league and you've got Zeke on your roster, that means that you've either, in some form, you've invested a lot of capital to get him. You've either traded for him at some point before your trade deadline, at which point you still will have had to give up a relative amount because you thought that he was going to return on that, or you've taken him in the top 3 picks in your draft.
Yep.
At which point, with the trade deadline passed, there's nothing you can do, and at the end of the day, he's the starting running back on a team that are going to want to run the ball, so you have to play him. Where this gets really interesting, in my opinion, is if this is Dynasty. And the reason I find this really interesting is because I did trade Zeke away in our Dynasty at the start of the season. So, obviously, that's ironically, it looks like none of us won that trade. I mean...
Mac and Johnson going the other way for me. I think I got Stills and Zeke. I cut Stills not long after.
Was it literally just Mac and...
just Mac and Johnson.
No picks.
No picks.
That was it. It was 2 for 2.
Okay, well, I mean,
done.
I still think Mac might be able to come back next year and get a gig somewhere, so but that's a separate thing. But I think Zeke now at this point, like you said, is going to be in a really interesting spot kind of once the trades open up again in Dynasty, because if he stays on the Cowboys, right, he's getting paid so much money that he absolutely 100% has to be the bell cow back, because you can't justify paying someone that amount of money and not give them 15 to 20 carries a game. So if they come back next year with a healthy Zeke, a healthy Dak, and they shore up the offensive line in a draft where they're going to be drafting relatively high, then suddenly Zeke's probably a top 5 running back again. But leading up to then, there's so many if, buts, and maybes that there's not the value there. So you probably might want to think, I want to trade him away, but the value's not there. So it's a horrible one for me for Dynasty. I don't want any part of it, which is why I got shot before it all went downhill. I thought, right, quit while I'm ahead.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're in redraft, you've got to play him.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? A very tough player to deal with this season because you're right, you can't drop him from your team. It's too good.
The upside is, I think that first 4 games was statistically, if you sort of take it as an average across like the big stats of running backs, it was actually one of his best years yet. Even with the movement there's been on that O-line, which there's been a few injuries, so it's gotten worse throughout the year. So I think it goes, especially if they draft someone, it gets way better. But I think, for me personally, what I'm doing is I shopped Zeke probably about a month ago, and then shopped him right on the deadline. Actually, probably about 2 months ago, and then on the deadline again. It just wasn't there price-wise for what I needed, so I was like, just hold him. When it comes around to it again, that's something you could try maybe during your draft. Get people when they're like thinking, I needed this, or I'd love that player. Or if you want to move up, try and juggle Zeke about then. Or hold him, get through in the off-season. Suddenly they've got a new offensive guard or whatever who's looking great in camp. The hype train builds.
The draft will
and at that point you might be able to sell him on a high.
Exactly.
And then, because he's got this in his locker to have these sort of moments where he
is Zeke after all.
Exactly.
He's still Zeke.
Exactly. And Zeke, not past getting high, so...
There you go.
Yeah, that's what you want to look for in your fantasy
roster. Let's move on to the next question then, shall we? And this one comes in from Twitter. It comes from a user called Probart96, who is the 96th Probart Seth in the world.
Well, he was late to that one.
He was very late. A lot of ancestors, has to be said. And he asks, Zach Moss against the Chiefs or Melvin Gordon against the 49ers?
Oh.
Which I think is a very, very difficult conversation to have. So, Sam, let's kick us
Yeah.
off.
Oh.
See, normally I'd say I'm not sure the Broncos are sold on Melvin Gordon. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
they're not.
No one is
it-
around the
no,
around the league at
it's-
this point.
No one wanted to pay him. I mean, I suppose he did get paid $8 million a year, which is nothing to turn your nose up at.
For us.
Yeah.
Look at us. But I don't think the league sold on him, and they've quietly still got Lindsay sitting in the wings. He always looks good and good enough, and he gets paid nothing. But Zach Moss against the Chiefs, which
With Singletary there as well.
yeah, I think I'm going to take Gordon because they did pay him, and he is the de facto, or at least the de jure number one. And when they get on the goal line, like personally, I would rather have Gordon on the goal line than Philip Lindsay.
Yeah.
I mean, Royce Freeman stole a couple carries last week, but I don't think we can read into much on that just because they didn't have a quarterback. So I am taking Gordon, but this is one that I think is all down to a touchdown swing, and I'm just going to take that because I think the Broncos have probably got a better chance than the Bills.
So now I'm going to be really unhelpful to a young provider because I'm going to go on side of Zach Moss. I like the fact he is the goal line guy. We've seen that it happened last season, whoever is the back behind Singletary seems to end up being their goal line guy. Moss has done it a few times this year that gets a few rushes here and there, especially a few more towards the end of the game. But when it comes to it, gets that touchdown, gets that goal line carry, which carries him to a decent enough week. Melvin Gordon is, I think, actually more boom or bust. For me, it feels more like he'll break a massive run. He doesn't have to have the touchdown to have the big week. He can have a solid week just off breaking off a few big runs. But he hasn't
which
done
is
it
why
consistently.
I think I
is my
prefer
problem.
that, just because when I rely on a guy for a touchdown, I think it's one of those superstition things. You know, when you rely on a guy for a touchdown, you put him in your roster for 3 weeks on the trot, and he does nothing.
Yep.
And then you take him out because you're like, oh, he's just a touchdown upside guy, and then he goes off for 3 touchdowns.
It's the Latavius Murray in your flex spot.
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
Like-
I would rather go on the guy who's going to get more opportunity. And I think that's for me in fantasy. I want the guy who gets the opportunity and getting the load rather than go, okay, this guy might get 3 carries, but they're all going to be on the goal line. It's like, but they've got to get to the goal line. There's so many more things.
I think that's what I agree with you as well. Because Gordon against the 49ers, that's a much more favourable matchup than Moss against the Chiefs, who have looked pretty damn good this year. So if I'm the deciding vote,
I'm thinking game script though, because it's Gordon's against the Chiefs. So if the Chiefs are throwing the ball and get up, suddenly they're gonna say to Drew Lock, right, air it out.
Yeah, I think we're getting mixed up.
Yeah,
here.
it's Bills Niners.
It's Bills Niners.
Bills Niners. Oh, is it?
So the game
Broncos,
scripts are going the
Chiefs.
other
Yeah,
way.
I thought so.
In which case,
I'm not sure though.
That's-
Because I
The
think I'm
Niners
still
aren't going to get
going-
up. That game is going to be run heavy with Josh Allen throwing some bombs when he can, as he does. But they're going to have to run the ball to rely on that, and that is going to look the same as the standard Bill script. Which I think for Denver, like they've had games that they've been in, like the one with the Chargers, where you could see them give the running backs time. Against the Chiefs, they could be down. I mean, to the Bucks, they could be down heavy early. And you can't run them. You can't establish the run in that scenario. Especially when you've got your
That is
supposedly
true. That is
franchise gunslinger
Cool.
quarterback in Drew Lock. You're going to say to him, right, you want to be our guy. You need
I'd
to
like to
prove you
switch.
can go it.
I'm switching as well.
I've convinced them both.
Well, I think what convinced me was
You got me on the spot.
getting the teams wrong on that one. I apologise to young Probart out there because that does.
He's all
swing with
kinds
me.
of confused now,
Yeah.
isn't he?
So just to clarify, Zach Moss is playing against the 49ers
For the Bills.
for the Bills, and Melvin Gordon is playing for the Broncos against the Chiefs. And for that reason, I'm switching. I'm going with you.
So we'll go Moss.
Zach Moss is the play this week. So Bart, if you're out there, Zach
Put him
Moss.
in your team.
Put him in your team. Maybe probably a flex though, depending on who else you've got. If that's your
Yeah,
team,
if that's for one of your starting running back spots, you're on the
you're
road.
very
Yeah,
concerned.
they're-
Unless your receiver core is
unless
stacked.
you're my dynasty team, at which point I'd love to have Zach Moss starting running back.
It was you when the news about, was it Royce Freeman might be the emergency QB? You were
I
like,
was like,
brilliant,
yes,
he
I
might
like
have
it.
value.
I think I traded a second round pick in the off season to pick him up because I thought they'd get rid of him. I thought they'd trade
Women
him.
be giving advice.
Well, boys, that is all the questions we've got from Instagram today and Twitter,
dear.
of course. I think it's a good first episode in person. Though. I think
Yeah.
we've done a good job.
in the studio.
in the studio. That is.
But what a time to be alive, eh?
What a time! What a time! But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. So, be sure.
Whatever you
I'm
say.
going aggressive. Be sure to go to YouTube, go like, comment, and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell. You know, we're not going to
Probably
forget.
up here.
Up here, up there. We now know where to point as well for these things, which is brilliant. So we can see
No, that way.
that way.
Yeah,
There you go. There, down
you
there.
go.
Down there.
Yeah, just
There,
down
somewhere down
There
there.
we go.
Also, check us out on
Wow, I figured
Twitter.
that one out.
Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. We're at the Brit Iron. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bad news.